Very good. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our September community meeting. I was scolded last month for not introducing myself, so we'll start there. I'm Chris Schmidt. I have the pleasure of being the board chair for Ohio City Incorporated, and we'd like to welcome you here this evening to review some of the work we've been doing, where we're headed, and some of the exciting things happening in the community. So without further ado, we have a couple of folks here tonight to do just some brief updates on what they're doing, and one of those is an awesome small business that we have in our neighborhood. I'd like to have Mary and Zach from La Boracana come up and give us I screwed up the name, La Boracana. I have to slow it down. Come on up and give us an update on what's the latest at your store.
Well, I'm Madi, and this is my son, Zach. On June 18th, me and my son became the owners of La Boracana Foods. My brother actually had passed away that day. That's why he can talk. So we inherited the food store, and not knowing how bad it was financially, we just said, okay, we're going to take it on, and we decided to take it on. We had issues getting some products and things like that, but the vendors are starting to trust us a little bit more, and they're releasing products to us. So we're trying to get the store back up and running. It is open, so please come visit us. We are open. We have food, if no one's ever been there. It's an international food store, so it's not just all food from Puerto Rico or anything like that. It's been around, my brother would have owned it coming next year, 30 years. But it's been there when I was a little girl at 6, 7 years old, and I'm 60. So if that tells you anything, I used to go there with my parents and get food from everywhere. So we do serve the Caribbean islands, we serve Central America, South America, Jamaica, Africa. We do also have, it's just not the staples, we do have meat that we sell, and a lot of people like coming there because no other store does what we do. We sell fish, and we slice it all up in small pieces. People like to have it all cut up, that they don't have to go home and cut it up. So that's one thing that we do. And everybody that we have met, me and him, he worked there during college time. They are just, please don't close our store down. Please, this is the only place that we can get our products. So we're just hoping that the word gets out, that we are out there, and please come and support us. We get most of our products on Thursday through Saturday, so everything we get kind of goes pretty fast, but we hope to really honestly, start stocking and bring in more food in and more vendors to come see us. Okay, so I don't know if you want to say.
I don't have too much to piggyback off that. Besides, so the weekends are really the busy days. We're struggling a little bit with staff, especially with COVID, everything going on. I'm a physical therapist, so I work full-time actually as a physical therapist. My mom's a nurse, so we have our own, full-time professions, which makes this even that much more of a challenge because it really demands full attention. Like my uncle was there every single day, 7 days a week. So, for us, we don't have a business background. It's a very different world coming from the medical field going into a business field, right? So when you don't have that true expertise, it is tough on us, and we've lost a lot of staff. Really, since my uncle passed, we went from like 8 staff members to about 3. So with 3 staff and then trying us to help out, it has been rough, to say the least. So we're just trying to get our feet wet, try to really get the ball rolling on everything. That way, come the new year, we kind of can start over and see how things are going. So we are hiring. If anyone has, people in mind, or just in general, people can come check the store out. Like I said, it's 10:30 to 7 every day except Sundays, which is 8 to 5. And we're closed on Tuesdays too. So we are basically there every day though. So there's always someone there. So come check us out. We're literally 2 minutes from here, right on Fulton. So.
If anybody knows, it's a part-time job, and we're looking for 2 people right now, and hopefully that we can build up and open up Tuesdays and hire more staff like he needs to. So it's a cashier and somebody who knows how to cut our meat. So that somebody that, it's not like I said, it's fish and chicken and stuff, so it's not a lot of cows and all that kind of steaks and stuff like that. So it's not a real big thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so hopefully you guys can pass the word and support us.
Thank you.
Awesome, and thank you both for being here. I forgot that I had a slide to show you before I called up our guest, which was the agenda for tonight. We already had one of these. We're going to have our folks from Irishtown Bend come in just a second. I have some updates. I'm sure there's many questions about where we are as an organization and where we're headed. So we have some updates there, and then we have presentations on the People's Budget Campaign, both from Molly Martin and from Councilman McCormick coming up at the end. And then we will try to get out of here in an hour or less. That's the Safeway guarantee. All right, so with that, we have some events coming up that we want to make sure you check out. Movie night coming up. If you've been to one of these in the past, they're super fun. We had probably 50 kids plus parents last year at our Halloween movie. We'd love to have you come and join us on Saturday, October 7th for that. That's going to be at, remind me? Greenwood Park, that's right. I thought that was right, but I didn't want to say it out loud. Greenwood Park, so please come down and check out that evening with our friends in the Block Club down there who do a fantastic job of pumpkin decorating and community activities and all of those things, and so check that out. Community meeting will be coming up next month on October 17th. We have our Fall Walk and Halloween event that happens right around the library on the 27th. Community meeting again in November. Our last one, special date, we had to move it, is the 14th of November. And then we have some other things coming up later in the year, too, that I would have you put on your calendar. Ohio City Family Party on Saturday, September 16th. The Saturday, December 16th. That makes more sense. And then I didn't do this slide. Brandon did this slide. Katie did this slide, so apologies. And then one to mark your calendar for Near West Rec Casino Night, which you've been to one of those in the past. They're super fun, and it's a great way for us to fund Near West Rec, which helps 1,400 kids on the Near West Side play sports. It's one of the biggest urban sports leagues in the country now, and a lot of those kids play for free through scholarships and donations, and that happens because of the generosity of folks who come to our events. So with that, I'm going to move on. Introduce 2 folks. There's only one name on the slide, but our friends from Canalway Partners, Mira, and then also Sarah, who is going to talk to us about the Irishtown Bend interpretive plan. As you may have heard, there's a small park going over the hill. As you may have seen this week, fences are going up, things are changing rapidly by the day, but we're looking ahead to what's after, right? What's after all of those bulldozers go away and there's a park in its place, and what does that space look like? So Sarah and Mira, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you all very much for taking some time, letting us have some time this evening. My name is Mira Cardenas. I'm the Executive Director for Canalway Partners. I see some friendly faces out there who have engaged with us on other projects that we've worked on. Mainly what we do over the last 35 years is we share the cultural and historic assets and recreational sites of the Ohio-Neary-Canalway National Heritage Area in Cuyahoga County. The way many of you probably have interacted with Canalway in the past, we were the main nonprofit partner on the Towpath Trail and also forthcoming on Canal Basin Park. And we were invited by Land Studio and Ohio City to work with them on telling those history stories that a lot of people are uncovering at Irishtown Bend. So some of you might have participated in some aspect of Irishtown Bend. You might have met park planners. You've probably talked with folks about what you want to see at the park. And this is similar and will intersect with the work that's already being done. So this is not like a completely separate plan. We're not out on our own doing this. There are a lot of partners involved in this. And so Sarah is a very talented interpretive planner. And what she is working on is discovering what those stories are and how those stories are told. And what you want to see in the park is really important to that. So I'll let Sarah explain a little bit more about the work that she's doing this week here and how you all can voice what you want to see in the park.
All right, thank you, Mira, and thank you, y'all, for having me. How's everybody doing tonight? I'm an interpreter, so let's everybody get involved. Yay! So thanks for having me. So before we kind of get started, and this will be very brief, I promise, I want to invite y'all to take a moment to think about an experience that you had. Maybe you were on a tour at a park, like a guided hike. Maybe you went to a museum. But think back to when you had a really impactful experience, like you learned about something about nature or history that really stuck with you. I hope anyway that we've all had those experiences that sort of carry with you. And so an interpretive plan, you probably hear that word interpretation, like what does that mean? Are we translating languages? What are we doing? Well, what we're getting at with the interpretive plan is what we're trying to do is to get to a place where the people who come to Irish Town Bend will have those similar meaningful experiences, right? Like something that really changed their perspective, or maybe they learned something in a new way. So that's kind of what we're after in a sort of touchy-feely sense, right? And you'll see on this slide, it says an interpretive plan is a vision for the future that will ultimately help visitors connect to and learn about important places. And we absolutely think that Irish Town Bend and its history is a really important place. And so at a basic level, an interpretive plan basically answers these questions, right? What are the most important stories of places like parks and historic sites? How do these stories connect and intersect with one another? And then how should these stories be told? So we're working through this plan. It's going to take us at least through the end of the year, and right now we're in the phase where we're really trying to get to the heart of these questions and really get to answer these questions. So that's why I'm here tonight. I want to hear from all of you to learn about what you think are the most important stories at Irish Town Bend. I really want to know what you're curious about. Is there something about that story of that place that you just want to know more? And we also are interested in learning more about, well, how should those stories be told? So do you want to go on a guided tour? Do you want to go on a bike tour? Maybe you want to experience like some public art or whatever it might be. So that's what we're here to do. And so in the back of the room, if you look on that back wall, I've got 4 posters up there that we would love each and every one of you to participate in. And I'll be back there to answer questions. But it's really just trying to get to the heart of really what the community would want to see at Irish Town Bend. So thanks, y'all.
Awesome, thank you both. And you may have seen the work start on the park this week. That is a 24 to 30 month project to be able to finish all of the work, to finish the hillside, to do all of the restabilization, to do the bulkheads, all of that stuff. And then the park will come after that. So we probably are looking at an opening of a park around my birthday in 2027, in July. What? It's all for you. Yeah, of course. Yeah. So we are also in the midst of fundraising mode. We're $30 million short. So if anybody has your checkbook, we will be glad to chat after we're done. So, updates. Let's talk about some good things first. Closure of Market Avenue, finally. Thank you for everybody who was involved in that. Conversation that had been going on for actually many years. We, through some savvy work by the staff and the councilmen and other folks, figured out that the road that was Market Avenue was never actually a road and was always part of the park, and it was deeded as part of the park, and so now it's part of the park. So that's exciting to do that. I want to say, especially though, make sure you're supporting those small businesses there on Market Avenue. I think we've heard from most that they've seen an uptick in business since it's closed, and some others maybe not. So make sure that you are doing everything you can to help support those small businesses that are there. We're looking at some programming stuff to happen this winter, actually starting in a couple of weeks with the vendors there on Market Avenue. So keep an eye out for stuff happening in December, January, February to make sure that we're activating that space. 44th and Bridge, traffic calming. If you've been by 44th and Bridge, it looks a lot different than it did about 2 weeks ago. And this was a project that we took on with the support of the city, fully permitted. Everybody knew what was going on. There were plans. And then we painted one day, and then it rained. And then we painted the next day, and then it got dark. And then we painted again, and then it rained. And then we just kind of kept plugging along. And so a huge credit to our staff who chipped in for this, and many of the volunteers from the neighborhood, especially to Brandon and to Nate, who really were the workhorses over there trying to get this thing done. So we appreciate it. The delineators, the small pylons, the white ones, those went up today. So as of today, the project is done, which is thankfully. As you may have seen if you're on our Facebook group, there's been a lot of discourse about this project, which is good. We love community feedback. But the reality is, yes, we're trying to slow down traffic. Yes, we're trying to create a funnel where cars go where they're supposed to go. That's the whole point of a traffic calming project, is to make sure cars are where bikes expect them to be, and where bikes are where cars expect them to be, and pedestrians are where we expect them to be, and so forth. It's intended to be a safety project for every mode of transportation, walking to driving semis, and we hope that this is a good proof positive of what can come from here. This is intended to be temporary. This is not a permanent long-term solution. If we are very hopeful that this will last a month before the delineators start disappearing. It might be a day. We don't know. But we're going to do our very best to try to keep it as active and upright as we can. Make sure also you go over and check out what's going on over there at the area. The whole impetus for this project was we've had 3 people killed at that intersection in the last 5 years. And speed was involved in every one of those accidents because people were driving too fast through what they think is a highway on-ramp that goes all the way down to 90. So we've got to slow that down. That's what this whole project is about. So, all right, let's talk about the organization. So many of you know Tom McNair. Tom McNair, after 13 years of service, has decided to be a bum and leave us and go somewhere else. He went downtown, got an offer he couldn't refuse from the mayor to join the senior staff downtown as the Director of Economic Development. He's been a great asset for us for 5 years in, 5 years in the development work that we're doing, and then for 8 years as the Executive Director. His last day was 8 years to the day of when he took the job. I will tell you, when he interviewed for the job 8 years ago, he cried in the meeting because it meant so much to him. And on his last day in the job, he cried because he didn't want to leave. So I don't think you're going to meet a more genuine person than Tom. And really put his heart and his passion into what's going on. A lot of our success is dedicated back to him, and so we're so thankful that he was here and wish him all the best downtown. Plus, it's never bad for the neighborhood to have a friend in City Hall, and so it's nice to be able to make a quick phone call with all of the economic development projects we're looking at to Tom and to see what's going on. So who's in charge? The answer is the same people that were in charge before Tom left. We are a nonprofit. We're run by a board. And the board sets the tone, sets the direction of the organization, and sets the priorities for the staff. That hasn't changed. It's still, the staff is still working very hard every day at the direction of the board, and we're really focused on creating an environment that we can help staff finish projects, to do whatever we can that they would have done with Tom here. So these are all of our Board of Trustees members. Can you raise your hand if you're on the Board of Trustees and you're in the room? There's about 5 of them back here. So thank you for being here. Make sure you talk to them, talk to me about anything you'd like to provide feedback on. We think we're easy to find, and then we have people tell us we don't know who you are. So it's on our website. Hunt us down. We're at most every block club. We're at most every community meeting. We're always glad to answer questions there. More specifically, I am there at the OCI office. We'll call it 30 plus hours a week. It's really 50 plus hours a week, but trying to keep a hand on the wheel. I have no intention to do anything to distract the staff from the great work that they're doing, but we are trying our very, very best to keep things moving, and so I've stepped in to help some with that day-to-day. Why aren't we hiring an executive director? That's the other question that's come up. Because we don't know where we're headed, and that's what I'm going to get to next. But who's really in charge at OCI? Well, you take Tom out of the picture here, but the rest of the folks around is our wonderful staff, many of whom are here this evening, who do awesome work on day in and day out. My biggest thing as a leader in this organization is to get out of the way of the smart people, and so we try everything we can to empower them to do their jobs. So let's talk about Ohio City and Tremont. Who has heard a rumor out there on the street that we are merging and there's no feedback available and it's all over? Yeah, okay. Because I've heard that rumor. That's not true. Let's talk about what's actually happening. So there are conversations ongoing. What's happening is a joint strategic planning process between the two organizations to look at efficiencies. The reality is that both organizations have to be bigger, better, stronger to survive. Number two, why? Funding cuts for CDCs, both from the city perspective and the federal perspective, and from foundational perspectives and from philanthropy perspectives. CDC money is harder to come by. And the smaller your organization is, the harder that money is to come by. In the reality, we serve about 10,000 people here in Ohio City. Some of the CDCs are much larger than us, like 3 and 4 times that size. So if I'm a founder, or if I'm a funder trying to give money, and one person is doing something for 40 and another person is doing something for 10, the math doesn't work out in our favor. So all of a sudden, the size of the CDC is important. When are we going to be doing this strategic plan? 12-week process is the plan. RFP to launch any moment now. I'm hoping tomorrow. And then a 12-week plan with a consultant after that. This will effectively run through the end of 2023. So, is this new? Absolutely not. All we're doing is talking about formalizing something that already exists, in the sense that programs like the Near West Recreation Program that I mentioned earlier, under the guise of, under the supervision, I should say, of Carrie Palma back here in the corner, on our staff. Carrie is a member of the Ohio City staff that works with 4 different CDCs across the Near Rec side to provide recreation for 1,400 kids. The reality is she's part of our team, and she's also part of a broader team that involves more than us. Same thing for the Near West Land Trust. This was created a few years ago to really focus on affordability, low-income housing, open land space, all of the things that we all hear from you that are important in this neighborhood. We created this alongside Tremont under the guise of Near West Partners to be able to focus on these problems a little more systematically. The board for the Near West Land Trust is Near West Partners that I mentioned, that's split half and half between Ohio City leaders and Tremont leaders. So this stuff is already happening. Is it uncommon for the CDCs to be talking? No. Northwest Neighborhoods is a great example just to the west of here. They had 2 different CDCs, Cadell Improvement Corporation and Detroit Shoreway Improvement Corporation, that have merged to form one new corporation named Northwest Neighborhoods. Why haven't you heard of Northwest Neighborhoods? It's because Northwest Neighborhoods as an entity doesn't really matter. That's the umbrella to oversee the organizations, but from a branding perspective and a community service perspective, they still go to market, quote unquote, as Detroit Shoreway and Cadell and Edgewater. That hasn't changed. The visibility has not changed around that. The other thing to note is 3CDC, which is in Cincinnati, is a CDC that exists for the whole city of Cincinnati. One CDC. A few years ago, Cleveland had 30. Now we have 22. Columbus has 6, and Cincinnati has 1. So it gives you a perspective just in terms of scale. Our model may have worked for many, many years, but it's quickly reaching the end of the runway, and we've got to reconsider from a funding perspective. So the goals, 1 + 1 = 3. You can have my assurances as the board chair and from the board and from every community leader and every staff member, if this doesn't make sense for us, we're not going to do it. That's not, the intent is not, we're not being pushed into this, we're not being forced to a marriage we don't want. Things have to work out to be better than they are for us to make sure to do it. But if we do this the right way, 1 + 1 = 3 could mean reducing redundancies. We don't need 2 and 3 and 4 bookkeepers for CDCs that are aligned. We don't need people that specialize in one specific thing in every single CDC. All of a sudden, we're able to look at those overlaps and overhead cost, including executive director costs between the 2 organizations, and reduce those accordingly. We can expand capacities. I think this is the many hands make small work analogy. Right now, we have a staff of 11-ish. Tremont is 5-ish. The reason I say expand capacities is the reality is we both have jobs that we want to fill, and we want to fill them in the smartest way possible. So I think it's a reality that 2 organizations separate could become one organization that's 20 to 25 people, and all of a sudden expand our ability to get things done. And then improve capabilities. We're lucky to have specialists. We're lucky to have people like Ben Trimble back there in the corner, who are just experts at everything involving development on the Near West Side. Ben's expertise would be very useful to the folks in Tremont. Much like they have some event planners over there that their full-time job effectively is event planning. And I would love to have somebody on our staff to help Katie to do some more events. So we want to make sure that we are trying to align those as best we can. So who decides? The boards for each organization, in consultation with all of you and all of our members, would vote on any changes related to this. We're not doing anything in the dark of night. We're not doing anything in secret. This is all transparent. Nothing will change without going through a community process. In these meetings, in block club meetings, in OCIC meetings, whatever it is, there's going to be plenty of opportunity for feedback on what's going on. What's next? I have no idea. By the time we get to our meeting next month, it might be a different story. By the time we get to December or January, it might be a different story. I don't know. But we wanted to be as forthcoming as we could with what's actually happening in the background to where there were no surprises. I want everybody to be aware of what we're doing and where we're headed. So questions, come to all of these. Hold on. Come to all of these, or reach out to me. It's my information. That's my cell phone number, my Ohio City email address that I was blessed with 2 weeks ago. Please, please, please reach out if we can do that. The only other thing I want to mention, I'll come right to you, Al, is from a community service perspective, and I should have mentioned this with Northwest Neighborhoods. They have dedicated resources for each of the neighborhoods that are under that new umbrella CDC. There would still be people focused on Ohio City, theoretically sitting in Ohio City, and people focused on Tremont sitting in Tremont. From a services perspective, nothing should change visibly. What should change is the back office supporting those 4 or 5 people are able to be more effective and more efficient at what they do. So, Al. Wait. Oh, we have rules. I'm sorry. Come to the mic if you're able. We'll bring the mic around to you. Try to keep all questions and comments concise and appropriate. Speak twice only if everybody's spoken once. Be respectful and listen. Thank you. Al.
So I have a major concern when you bring up 3CDC. 3CDC is a monopoly in Cincinnati, which has created, which has helped to forge the destruction of some really key neighborhoods, has really been a detrimental effect to residents in Lower Price Hill and over the Rhine. So I'm very concerned when you put 3CDC up there. I don't think that's a good model, and I don't think that we should be anywhere near like what 3CDC is in Cincinnati.
That's totally fair. And the only reason I put it up there was to say, in terms of scope, we have 22 and Cincinnati has 1. That's not to say that one model is perfect, as one model is better than the other. It's just to show that there's a lot of different ways to skin this cat, to use the farm phrase, right? There's a lot of different ways to go about this. We just need to make sure that we are being reasonable with money can only get divided in so many ways. And so that's the only balance. But I appreciate that feedback, yeah.
You mentioned that funders really were looking, like, it's easier to get funding when you're bigger.
Yep.
What are some of the things that funders are willing to fund for a bigger organization that they are no longer willing to fund at smaller organizations?
You bet. So the partner that we have in this project is Cleveland Neighborhood Progress. They were created as a proxy, a middleman, I don't know what to say, between the city and the CDCs as a way to help guide the future of the CDCs. Their specific funding around development and around personnel, so around human capital, is directly tied to the service level that you can reach. So things, anything from individuals to funding for a project that may be happening in the neighborhood, Market Avenue Park would be a great example. That's something that the funders may be more apt to have a conversation with, depending on how many people are actually involved. So it really is project by project, and it's CDC by CDC, so it's hard to make a blanket statement. But the reality is, the more bodies you can say in your strategic plan that you help, the easier it is for people to invest that money. So, other questions? Okay, so this was the first of many conversations about this. Don't be bashful. You know where to find me. I'm glad to answer any questions you have through this process, as is anyone on the board and anyone on the staff. Like I said, there's no secrets here. We're trying to do everything as above board and open as possible, and hopefully we'll get to a good answer. That answer may be, this is a crazy idea, we're going to stay how we are, but the absolute worst case scenario in this entire process is we stay how we are. Right? So, okay. I'm going to do another update. This one may get excited, so everybody relax. DORA, Designated Outdoor Refreshment Area, which is basically an open container exemption law, which we'll talk about in a second. Disclaimers before I say anything else in this conversation. This is not our project. We have not taken a position on this project. We have no say right now in what's going on with this project. Special Improvement District, so the business community, will likely be the organizer of the DORA, not us. They're a separate organization. We help influence them, but ultimately they're separate. And our job is opportunity to provide feedback and then communicate that feedback to the people involved. And so that's why I'm bringing it to you tonight. How many of you have heard rumors about this in the neighborhood in the last 2 weeks? Oh, yeah. Pretty exciting. So it is a DORA, legally defined up here, as designated as exempt from outdoor open container provisions as laid out in the Ohio Revised Code, created by the state legislature in 2016. And then within the boundaries of the DORA, you can take a beer or a wine or whatever it is, you can take it outside of a bar and be outside in the designated area. You may not take the drink out of the designated area, and you also can't take the drink into any other bar. How do we know? There's these special cups that they have. This one is from Minerva, Ohio, that you have this designated cup. They pay a little extra to take the cup outside. Say it's an extra quarter for your beer. You take the cup outside. When you get another drink, you get another cup. I wish that wasn't the answer from a waste perspective, but that's how they manage it right now. So, do they exist? They do. There's 160 of them in Ohio. This is not a new concept. They are everywhere, as diverse as downtown Cincinnati and downtown Columbus, to Sandusky, to my hometown of Newark, Ohio, to Cuyahoga Falls, to there's one in Warren that involves about half a block. So they are broad, they are small, they're out there. I would encourage you to go check one out. This is off the Department of Commerce's website if you want to go check it out. Do they exist here? Yes, there's 5 in Cuyahoga County. They're all out in the eastern suburbs. Van Aken is the closest one to here, the Van Aken district and that development they did. The rest of them are even further out than that. So they're out there. Cleveland has the potential to create up to 6 under the statutes, under the legislators' rules in Columbus. The first approved DORA is East 4th Street. That will be launching soon-ish. We think soon-ish. But that will happen, obviously, you all know where 4th Street is, as a contained area down there. So how do they happen? 4 more people with liquor licenses get together and they fill out an application. That gets approved by the council. That gets approved by the state of Ohio. That gets approved by a lot of folks. 75% of the commercial tenants, that's another important thing here. It's not residents voting. This doesn't go to the ballot box. It's the commercial tenants that get to say that it's going to happen. And then it can be expanded or contracted, and then 5 years, every 5 years we get to reapprove it, or the state or the city has a chance to reapprove it. It's really kind of a flexible amoeba. Is the best way to describe it. It can kind of expand and contract as it needs to, and a lot of the ones around Ohio that I showed you have done exactly that. One that I would point to is down in Columbus, the Nationwide Arena, Nationwide Boulevard that connects Nationwide Arena and where the Columbus Clippers play and where the Crew plays. That's all one DORA, all down the street there. The street runs down the middle. The street's not closed down. You don't have to close down a street to do this. It all runs down the middle, and you can connect and walk with your beer from a stadium to a stadium, and so on. So here's the things I wanted to really get out of my system. No one's proposing Bourbon Street. That's not where we're at. No one's shutting down 25th Street or Lorraine or Detroit Avenue. We don't have to close any streets for this conversation. The master plan for the West Side Market is a big part of this. A big part of the push is if you go to public markets around the country, a lot of them you can get a glass of wine and shop. Here you can't do that. The DORA, theoretically, would include the market, and the alley outside the market will be reimagined as a new area, and then also the food hall, which will be reimagined again where the produce hall is now. That would be a part of whatever this conversation leads to. Anything else? Location, hours, sanitation plans, safety, all of that are locally set. None of that's set in stone. None of that is decided. At the bottom, there's no details. That's the biggest thing I want you to walk away from is, yes, there's a conversation happening, and no, there's no details. However, there's a group that will come here, I'm hoping, next month in October. If they're not here in October, they'll be here in November. Of representing local businesses up in the area, up in the Market Avenue area, to talk more details. They can provide you details that I don't have about what they're thinking for hours and all of that. If you see all of the doors online, hours vary from opening at noon and closing at 8 to opening at 10 a.m. and closing at midnight. Everything's really, really open. But at the very bottom, beware the toxic rumor mill. My favorite rumor about this was we were closing down 25th Street, and we were going to build bars in the middle of 25th Street and have a double-lined bar alley to mimic the French Quarter. That was my favorite rumor. So that's not happening. But when you hear those rumors, stop and think, wait a minute, that sounds like details that don't exist yet. So please help to quash those. So any questions on this before we move on? If you have comments on this, that's okay. I'd rather hold those until next time, but any questions about what I've said? Yeah. Oh, sorry. I broke the rules again.
One question, which is, does such a district have to be contiguous? That is, since they rebranded my neighborhood as Hingetown, and I've been told for 30 years that this neighborhood is not becoming an entertainment district, this seems to certainly be going in a specific direction. So let me just ask the other, then you can answer both.
Yeah.
The other is, you said that 75% of, I forget the exact
commercial
term,
tenants.
Commercial, yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any input by residents that also would speak to this in addition to the merchants and
Sure.
providers?
So I'll take the second one first. The answer is through a community feedback process that we're going to help lead, because that's ultimately our interest here, is making sure the residents are a part of the conversation, and then feedback to council. That's honestly the best way to up or down this, is to make sure as it's going through the legal process that we're providing the feedback that will be helpful. This will likely go on CoUrbanize, which is our project planning site, for people to do open comment on it. And so that's another great way to provide feedback that we can provide back to people who make the decisions. From my understanding, I'm not an expert on this. Again, this is only 6 years old, so it's kind of new for everybody. But it has to be contiguous, and it has to be contained within 1 square mile. So from a square mile perspective, I would think that Hingetown is too far away from the Market Avenue. I would think it would have to be different, Doris, I think. That's one that we probably would have to get out the ruler on the map. I think, from everything I've heard, that would be a separate application. What, I'm sorry? Not, all the ones that you see around Ohio are all absolutely contiguous. What I'm not sure of is if you do the dog bone congressional district model, right? If there's one street that connects the two, is that contiguous? I don't think that works here, but I don't know. There's only 6 in the whole city. That's the important part. We're set by legislation that there's only 6 in the entire city of Cleveland. Any other questions about this? Whew, we survived. All right, thank you. Okay, now we get to something fun and non-confrontational. We have a couple of speakers here tonight. We're going to do this in 2 steps. So Molly Martin is here, campaign manager for the participatory budgeting campaign, People's Budget Cleveland. Molly's going to speak for about 10 minutes, and then Carrie McCormick is going to come up and speak for about 10 minutes. We are not, I repeat, look at me in the eyes, we are not going to have a debate tonight. There's a debate in a few weeks if you want to go to the debate. This is just informational. We're not going to do questions either as a forum. If you have questions, both Molly and Carrie will stick around and answer your questions, but we're trying to keep this as informational and as even-handed as we can, okay? Molly, all yours.
I want everyone to know that I would love for this to be a debate or a forum with back and forth, and I wish I had more than 10 minutes because there's a lot to say. And there's been a lot about this initiative that's developed in the last couple of days, and I think that context is really important to focus on. I'll stick around after if you all want to talk. I know a lot of you, I don't come to these meetings often, but I tend to come to these meetings when there's a lot of tension in the air. I last presented to this group earlier this year when there was a youth drop-in center that was going to start on Franklin Avenue, and the neighbors next door were opposing the project. I'm very sad to share that project has not started because the neighbor next door has sued, and that is stuck in court. So there are a lot of young people in our community experiencing homelessness who are in school who do not have a daytime drop-in center. And I think that that's terrible, and I hope that the variance that the Board of Zoning Appeals granted to Lutheran Metropolitan Ministries is eventually granted so that project can move forward. I live just around the block from La Borincana off of Fulton on Monroe near the cemetery. I'm a part of the Catholic worker community, and a lot of the work that I've done in this neighborhood has been around homeless activism and with the Cleveland Catholic worker community. I'm also the lead organizer for People's Budget Cleveland. We don't say participatory budgeting because it's too much of a mouthful, and this resonates more with people. Over the summer, our coalition collected over 6,000 signatures from residents to get issue 38 on the ballot. And what issue 38 would do is it would allow Cleveland residents to decide how 2% of Cleveland's budget is spent in their neighborhoods using participatory budgeting. It's a process that's used over dozens and dozens of cities in the US and around the world to create more on-ramps for people to get engaged in government. I'm a part of a coalition called People's Budget Cleveland, and we're a grassroots coalition that's committed to building community power and building deeper civic engagement beyond elections. I think the term power here is really important. I think a lot of times when I'm in public spaces like this, I feel tension because I grew up learning to feel really bad about power, like that's a dirty thing. But I think when you're confronting power that doesn't have people's interests in mind, that you need to bring a coalition together. And when I say a coalition, when I say power that doesn't have people's interests in mind, I want to share with you all that yesterday we found out that an Ohio State senator wants to block the people's budget issue. He intends to propose a bill that would preempt it. If any of you remember this happening with minimum wage legislation when a citizen-led initiative tried to do this in 2016, this is a Republican playbook. It's a power grab in Columbus, and they're trying to subvert a citizen-led initiative in Cleveland again by trying to preempt the people's budget. There are a couple elected officials in the room, and I really urge you to denounce that. I think that 2 of 3 people in Cleveland don't vote, and they don't trust government because you can spend months trying to get something on the ballot as citizens, and all it takes is 2 weeks for a Republican who wants more power in Columbus to say, we don't care that the citizens want this on the ballot, and they're trying to preempt it so it can't get implemented, and that's terrifying. And the same state senator who introduced this is the same senator who's responsible for a Senate bill that eliminated diversity, equity, inclusion, programs around sexuality and gender in schools, and is trying to promote a culture of white supremacy in the state, and it's dangerous, and he doesn't have a connection to the city of Cleveland. And that's separate from the fact that a lot of elected officials in Cleveland do not support issue 38. They believe that it's too much money and that we don't have the money for residents to decide how that gets spent in their neighborhood. And before Councilman McCormick shares his take on this, I just want to share a few things about the proposal and about the money. Because what I've learned as an organizer and as a person who doesn't have a lot of power, if you follow the money, oftentimes you can get the answers that you need when it comes to answering questions about why are things the way they are in our community. These are some of the partners that People's Budget Cleveland is comprised of. We work with Building Freedom Ohio, which is a Black-led organization of people who've been formerly incarcerated. And they usually don't mess around a lot in politics or with nonprofits. They're interested in building community power. And they have a lot of people on the east side talking with residents on why they think something like a people's budget is important for communities, especially communities that have been left out of decision-making spaces where decisions that impact their lives get made. The Young Latino Network, NAACP Cleveland endorses this initiative. I also work with the Northeast Ohio Coalition for the Homeless, OPAL, which is building Asian American and Pacific Islander feminist leadership, and a bunch of other groups, a lot of grassroots groups that aren't really big organizations that have a lot of power, but they're organizations that have their heart to the street and have relationships with people in their community and want to find new ways to get young people engaged and to get people brought into the political process. We started 2 years ago when Cleveland got $500 million from the federal government. We did a bunch of house parties around the city and said, if you could spend $1 million in your neighborhood, how would you do that? How would you spend that? We had gotten some endorsements from then candidate Mayor Bibb and a few members of City Council to do a pilot of participatory budgeting. That was introduced this past January. It would have been a one-time $5 million pilot, and that was out of $500 million, which was a one-time amount that the federal government granted to Cleveland. And Cleveland got that much because we're the largest poor city in the country. City Council, during a Finance Committee meeting, all of the members of City Council came to that meeting with the exception of one and went around and said, even though 2 of 3 residents of Cleveland don't vote, we have representative democracy, and if people want to have a say, they can come to City Council meetings, and we essentially don't need more on-ramps to democracy. And I will say we got a lot more supporters after that meeting because residents of Cleveland felt like just because you're representatives don't mean that you replace our voices. Like, we have a problem with representative democracy when this many people don't vote, and we need to be trying new things on how we do that. And I'll be frank, when we talk about participatory budgeting, it's not the same status quo ways of trying to get people's feedback. I think a lot of what PB means is probably not getting ideas in this space that is predominantly white. It means we're paying people for their time and actually dedicating time to a process and maybe doing more stuff in Lakeview and building up leadership of residents there. And it's not to say that groups like OCI and other nonprofits don't, but obviously a lot of the organizational questions around CDCs like this is that there are limited resources, and I think there are limitations to like some of the resources that could be brought into the community. This is a picture of some of the folks in our coalition at some of the events we've done around town and at a rally we had on the steps of City Hall. And I've said, some of these things, but I think something that's really important is that, my first job out of college was doing an AmeriCorps Vista, and I learned a ton about homelessness, and I've been doing that for the last 10 years. And I think it's not just being an elected representative or working in a city department. Like, I think that something like PB is trying to create new ways that people can conceive of political participation. And maybe we can build a culture of democracy by saying the way that we interact with our city is like just voting on how projects in our neighborhood get spent and not just voting for people on the ballot. And I think, there have been research done locally. 79% of people don't know who their council member is. And when you look at some of the data around low propensity voters, people who don't vote, like ideas around collective power resonate more with people who are less likely to vote. For people who don't know what participatory budgeting is, it's a year-long process that has different components of democracy built in, where there's a resident-led steering committee who acts as like a community engagement board of elections that pays folks to do a 2-year term limit where they have idea sessions around the city, shepherd ideas that might be, say, 1,000 ideas that eventually go onto a ballot where people are ranking, how are we spending this amount of money in this cluster of neighborhoods. And this is not something that we're asking to just make up in Cleveland. All these dots on this map are cities around the US that are doing participatory budgeting now or have. I used to live in Nashville, Tennessee. I was a homeless street outreach worker there, and just this past year, they piloted PB with ARPA and felt that it was a success that they're now doing another $10 million of it. Seattle's doing $30 million of PB. LA has an Undoing Institutional Racism pilot for PB that's $9 million. And there's a lot to learn from these cities because PB's only been in the US for 10 years, and a lot of the feedback that you get from doing in a more inclusive process are things that are embedded in the amendment of issue 38, which is, normally PB has been like, oh, council will give their discretionary funds, but there's no staffing, and then there's no continued funding. So they're really limited in what they could do. So actually institutionalizing it as part of a mandate that the city has to do it, putting staffing around it, and also broadening what sorts of funds could be used are things that we can do to make it successful in Cleveland. Just as an example, these are examples of projects and community events where PB's taken place. Things like public restrooms for unhoused folks, building improvements to city buildings where there's a youth drop-in center, urban farms, solar panels on firehouses, childcare for third shift workers, playground upgrades, things like that. So the charter amendment is for the equivalent of 2% of the city budget, which would be around $14 million. A lot of people ask where would the money come from. I know next week there's a debate on September 26th at 6 p.m. Doors open at 5:30, and it'll be at Public Auditorium right across from City Hall. 2 members of the committee that I'm a part of are going to be debating, a member of City Council and another member of the community. A couple of things that I want to address, because these are common questions that we get, is that it shouldn't be Ohio City is competing against Glenville for it. Like each city neighborhood or clusters of neighborhoods would be proposing ideas of projects, but you're really trying to uplift the leadership of people who are not the usual suspects, and what are like deeper ways that we can think of getting ideas from high schoolers. People who can participate in this process can be residents but not citizens. People don't have to be registered to vote. People can be homeless, and you could think about strategies about how are you doing idea sessions specifically there. I know I'm running out of time, so I'm gonna just end with this debate slide. And I know Councilman McCormick is following me, and I just want to state that like issue 38 is still very much going to be on the ballot, and despite some of the opposition from the State House in Columbus, who's trying to preempt this legislation, and from efforts, yesterday there was legislation that eventually got removed, but the City Council President was trying to introduce an ordinance to use taxpayer dollars to spend money to tell residents to vote against this. And I just want to remind people that this wouldn't phase in until 2027. In 2028, we will be paying off the Cleveland Browns Stadium, and that is $10 million that'll go back in the budget. If you're a homeowner in this neighborhood, there will be property tax increases next year, which is money in the budget. There's council discretionary funds, there's youth programming funds, and you all as voters have to decide how you'll vote on issue 38. But a lot of the concerns we hear from council is that there are going to be layoffs of essential workers, and I am just asking you as informed residents and people who can come to the debate and to decide for yourself, to decide whether this would be a good thing for democracy in Cleveland. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Molly. Councilman?
All right. Thank you, thank you. Oh, do you want Molly, your laptop, or is this your laptop? Oh, and I control from up here? Oh, awesome, okay. Well, good evening, everyone. Good to see everybody, and I'm excited to be here tonight. A couple quick things before I jump into the presentation. I want to recognize Chris. Chris has volunteered his time as a neighborhood resident to help run the ship at Ohio City and is doing a heck of a job. So can we just give a round of applause for Chris? And our board members too, who are here today as well. I want to thank Molly and the advocates of participatory budgeting. I have always said I was a community organizer before I was a council person. I'm still a community organizer, and I will take excitement and activism and disagreement all day over apathy. It means that our community is alive and having great conversations. So I really appreciate this conversation today. And I also want to make two quick blanket statements. Number one, I do not support any public dollars being used for campaigning. And number two, I do not support the preemption of this issue at the State House, just like we didn't support the gun control preemption, plastic bag preemption, and all these other things that the conservative members of the Ohio House do. It is not good for democracy. It's not good for our city. It is just bad all around. So I highly condemn that, and will do that in any fashion I can do that. And two other things too that are coming up. There's two other really important issues on the, others, but two I'll call out: cannabis and reproductive freedoms. I am voting yes on both of those issues. I'm more than happy to talk to folks afterwards about why that is, but those will also be on your ballot. Let me speak up. Those will also be on your ballot, so please make sure that you're paying attention to those as well. And then the last thing that I want to say before I jump into this presentation, I'm going to take this out. Am I allowed to do that? Before I jump into this presentation, is that when I first started on council almost 8 years ago, we were still, I know, wow, isn't that crazy? I'm looking at Judy saying, whoop, that's a long time. The city was still coming out of the economic recession. The same state house and governor had cut hundreds of millions of dollars of local government funding to the city of Cleveland, even though we produced the most money, Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati, for the state budget. Those were really, really difficult times. And while there's always improvement at the city, trust me, the city did a really diligent job of not laying off lots of people, of working really hard to balance our budget. And so that fiduciary job I'm really proud of at the city of Cleveland, because those were really tough times. Okay, Q&A. Here I am. Okay. So let me just start by saying, and Molly noted that council members are in support of the concept. I was one of those original folks. I really like the idea of participatory budgeting. I think it's the idea of further engaging community members in all processes in the city of Cleveland, I think is a good thing. So I just want to say that up front. But I don't believe that this charter amendment is the right way to do that. The second point is, and I'm going to have slides on all of these, so I'm just going to move on. I'm really proud of the community engagement in Ward 3. I mean, the day I started at Ohio City Inc., I was attending all 9 block clubs every single month. And that has been a culture in this community for decades and decades and decades and decades. Some folks in this room here today have been a part of that for a long time, a lot longer than I have. So on the left, that's a block club I was at last week. We had a great turnout. I see some of our block club members were here today that attended that. But the other thing I want to call your attention to is the Ward 3 and 15 Democratic clubs. There might be a Republican club for all inclusivity. I'm not a part of it, but I'll just focus on this for now. The Ward 3 Democratic Club, when we think about how do we engage folks and get them involved and get them voting and get them tuned into their communities, our ward club, run by who I think is a legend, Paula Kampf, is a prime example of how you do that. They have worked with Ward 15 as well diligently over years, engaging voters, engaging community members, talking about issues, hosting forums. And what we've seen out of that is the Ward 3 used to be the same ward, 10th out of 17 wards for voter turnout. We are now number 2 in the city. And that isn't by chance, that's by neighborhood residents organizing and engaging. So I'm really proud of that record that we have here in Ward 3, but it's not, don't be fooled, it's hard work to get there, and Paula is our fearless leader, and I give all credit to her, but it is elbow grease and hard work to get there. Faith and democracy, I want to talk about this. Thankfully, Ohio just defeated issue 1 in August, and we are seeing national trends about ways to kind of go around our democratic system instead of engaging with our democratic system. Our democratic system is by no means perfect at any level of government, and that is clear as day to all of us in the room, but I think it's really important for American democracy that we engage within that system. Issue 38 will remove $14 million, this is undisputed, from the city budget every single year once it phases in, I think, over a couple-year period, and maybe increasing, I think, with the percentage of the budget. That's $14 million removed out of the city budget that goes to essential services, which I'll talk about today. So once again, I don't want us to lose faith in the sense that we have to engage in our democracy. Whether we agree with folks 100% of the time or not, it's critical that we engage in our democracy. So this is something that I think is really important for folks to understand. The labor movement, as well as I learned a lot of our clergy on the east side of the city, have come out opposing issue 38. And I don't believe it's because they don't want community engagement or further conversations around the budget. But you'll see here that this is just a couple examples. Emergency medical services, firefighters, and the AFL-CIO, which contains teachers, iron workers, public servants, firefighters, EMS, letter carriers, service workers, janitorial service, nurses, aides, bus drivers, on and on and on. The AFL-CIO has unanimously voted to oppose issue 38 because they believe, our labor movement and unions believe, this will negatively impact their memberships that serve you every single day. So what does $14 million mean to you? I think this is a really important question that we talk about. So for context, we have to pass a balanced budget in the city of Cleveland. 3 minutes, okay. We have to pass a balanced budget in the city of Cleveland. State law. So it's not like Congress where we can go into all this national debt and spend like crazy. We have to pass a balanced budget. Right now, the city's budget, because of great fiduciary work, and we just got upgraded in our financial status, is structurally balanced. What the heck does that mean? That means that the revenue coming in matches the city services that we put out. So if you remove revenue, you will have to cut city services. That is not a scare tactic. That is not, some sort of political thing. That is a reality. If you remove revenue in a structurally balanced budget, you will have to either raise taxes or you'll have to cut services. So there are kind of three general places where it could come from: general fund, capital, and discretionary. This is Councilmember Moore's, I'm not taking credit for this, but I'll call your attention to two things. You can't see that. Okay, on the right-hand side, $700 million is roughly the general fund. Police, fire, EMS, building and housing, park lot maintenance, public health, Department of Aging, municipal services. These are everyday basic services. A lot of the work the city does isn't flashy, but it's critically important to the residents of the city of Cleveland. And this is exactly what we're talking about when we talk about the money that will come out of the city budget. Capital projects, right in front of you. On the left-hand side, you have Greenwood Pool, which we ran with the Block Club a process to hear from the neighborhood about what they wanted to see, and we were able to secure hundreds of thousands of dollars to renovate that beautiful park. On the right-hand side, that is the new Clark Field, which we worked with the Tremont neighborhood to redevelop a $2.7 million park, the most accessible playground in the city of Cleveland, with years of deep community engagement that we put in to make sure that our residents got what they wanted out of it. And then the resurfacing, of course, is a critical one. The other thing, discretionary funding too. This is likely probably a place where money would come from. So what does Ward 3 discretionary funding go to? Primarily to our local community development organizations. Community organizing, Near West Recreation, park programming. The meeting you're sitting in here tonight is we fund our CDCs to do this community organizing. The other thing too, other examples, Near West Rec, May Dugan, amongst many other organizations on the Near West Side, this is where the Ward 3 discretionary money goes. So if it were removed, you'll have to understand the impact on that. And as just a wrap up, because I'm getting the word here, participatory budgeting, the concept, engagement, deeper engagement, absolutely is a good idea. Our labor unions, our clergy, the mayor, city council do not support this issue because they understand the amount that it will cost at the $14 million and the impacts that we'll have on city services. And then the last thing I'll say too is, we hear a lot about New York. As context, New York is a $100 billion budget, and their participatory budgeting is $30 million. We are a $1.7 billion, and ours is $14 million. So love this idea. And the last thing I'll say, Chris, I promise, is that if this in fact if it does not fail, if it fails, if the voters do not vote for this, I am committed to work with Molly and anybody else to ensure that there is deeper engagement on the budget. Deeper engagement is better at all times, no matter what it is. So even if this doesn't pass, this is something that I think we still need to move forward with. So thank you.
Awesome. Hold on.
I did and I did. I did. So
That
the
we
answer
can-
is I did and I did.
That we can cover at the debate next week. So there's debate is what day? Remind me. I think it's on my last slide. What day is the debate next week? A week from today at 6 p.m. at Public Auditorium. I think, is that right? Okay, very good. So you can come to it there. Carrie, Molly, thank you so much. A round of applause for both of them. So we are done, but you still have homework to do. Back here in the back of the room, if you want to talk about interpretive plans at Irishtown Bend, if you want to talk to me about Ohio City or the Dora or anything else, I'm here. If you want to talk to them, please come up and chat and take some more food. There's lots of potato salad. So put some in your pockets, take it home. All right, we'll see you next month. Thank you.